Marcus Langston stood frozen in the Atlanta store parking lot, staring at his car's shattered windshield. Jagged glass framed a racial slur scratched deep into the surface, a hateful welcome he never expected. He'd come undercover, cap low, to check his home goods empire, assuming he'd find small cracks. Not this vicious stab. The busy Saturday crowd shuffled past, oblivious. This wasn't just vandalism. It was a warning of a battle that had reshaped his life, what festered inside his own creation. Before we dive in, where are you watching from? If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe for more raw stories like this. Marcus Langston shook off the chill from the parking lot, the echo of that jagged slur still clawing at his mind, but he had a job to do. He adjusted the brim of his faded cap, the rough fabric brushing his fingertips, and stepped through the automatic doors of his Atlanta home goods store. The place sprawled before him, a buzzing hive of polished shelves and gleaming displays, all under the banner of Langston Living, his multi-million-dollar brainchild. He'd built this empire from a single shop, pouring sweat and soul into a vision of quality and fairness. But today he wasn't the CEO in a crisp suit commanding boardrooms. He was just a guy in a threadbare jacket and scuffed sneakers, blending into the weekend crowd of shoppers. His pulse quickened, not from nerves, but from a burning need to see the truth, to peel back the shiny surface and peek at the guts of what he'd created. The air inside hit him with a cool blast, thick with the scent of lavender candles and fresh plastic, a sensory flood that tugged at memories of late nights sketching business plans. He squared his shoulders, ready to test the waters, to see if the values he'd hammered into this company still held weight, or if they'd crumbled under the grind of growth. The store thrummed with life. Carts clattered over the tiles, loaded with throw pillows and kitchen gadgets, while kids darted through the aisles, their laughter bouncing off the high ceilings. Employees in navy vests moved with purpose, some stacking boxes, others ringing up purchases with mechanical efficiency. To most, it had looked like a well-oiled machine, but Marcus wasn't here for the big picture. He wanted the cracks, the quiet moments that revealed what stats and reports couldn't. He drifted toward the kitchen section, his steps slow and deliberate, mimicking the aimless pace of a casual shopper. His eyes landed on a sleek black blender, perched on a middle shelf, its price tag dangling like a challenge. Perfect. He reached for it, fingers brushing the cool metal, and turned it over in his hands, squinting at the tiny print on the box as if puzzled. It was a test, simple but sharp, a chance to see how his staff handled the everyday. He glanced sideways, spotting a weary kid in a navy vest lingering nearby, maybe 19, with a mop of sandy hair and a slouch that screamed boredom. The kid's name tag read Jake, pinned crookedly to his chest. Marcus caught his eye, holding up the blender with a slight nod, and asked in a low, easy tone, "Hey, can you tell me if this thing's any good for smoothies?" Jake didn't move at first, just flicked his gaze up from the floor, sizing Marcus up like he was a speck of dust on the shelf. His lips twitched into a smirk, barely there but sharp enough to cut. "Read the box, man," he muttered, his voice flat and edged with something sour. Then he turned, scuffing his sneakers against the tiles, and walked off toward a stack of frying pans 10 feet away, leaving Marcus standing there with the blender still in hand. The words hung in the air, heavy and dismissive, but it wasn't just the laziness that twisted Marcus's gut. It was the way Jake's eyes had lingered, the quick scan of Marcus's faded jacket, his dark skin, the unspoken assumption baked into that smirk. Marcus set the blender down, slow and controlled, his jaw tightening as he clocked the scene unfolding a few aisles over. A white couple, maybe in their 30s, hovered near a display of coffee makers, their cart already brimming with pastel towels and a ceramic vase. Jake was there now, all smiles, leaning in like a salesman on commission. "Oh, this one's top tier," he said, loud enough for Marcus to hear, his tone bright and eager. "Grinds beans, froths milk, the works. You'll love it." The woman beamed, nodding, while her husband clapped Jake on the shoulder like they were old pals. Marcus stood rooted, the contrast slamming into him like a fist. He wasn't invisible to Jake. Not really. The kid had seen him, judged him, and decided he wasn't worth the breath over there. With the couple, Jake was a different person, all charm and hustle, practically rolling out a red carpet. Here, Marcus got a shrug and a sneer, brushed off like he didn't belong in his own damn store. His pulse thudded in his ears, a mix of disbelief and a slow, simmering anger he hadn't felt in years. He'd built this place to be better than that, to rise above the petty biases that dogged him growing up. But here it was, staring him in the face, wearing a navy vest and a smirk. The blender sat back on the shelf, untouched, but Marcus's hands flexed at his sides, itching to do something, anything, to shake the moment loose. He could have called it then, stormed to the back office, ripped off the disguise, and demanded answers. But that wasn't the plan. He'd come to see the raw truth, not to polish it up with his title. This was just the first jab, a pinprick, compared to what he might find if he kept digging. He took a breath, forcing the heat in his chest to settle, and scanned the store again. The couple laughed with Jake, oblivious to the slight that had just landed a few aisles back. Shoppers milled around, their carts squeaking, their chatter a dull hum against the pop music piping through the speakers. Marcus's eyes narrowed, zeroing in on the details. A woman in a red coat haggled over a rug with a stalker, her voice sharp but met with a patient nod. A teen in headphones bobbed past, juggling a lamp and a stack of plates. Normal, everyday stuff, the kind of bustle Marcus had dreamed of when he opened this location 5 years ago. It was the first store he'd planted in Georgia, a risk that had bloomed into a cornerstone of his chain, proof he could take on the big dogs and win. Back then, he'd walked these aisles himself, tweaking displays, chatting with customers, making sure every face got a smile. Now, standing here unseen, he wondered how much of that spirit had survived the expansion, the hiring sprees, the layers of management he'd handed the reins to. Jake was still with the couple, pointing out features on an espresso machine like he'd invented it, his hands animated, his grin wide. Marcus watched, the sting of that read the box line gnawing deeper. It wasn't just rudeness, not just a kid having a bad day. It was the ease of it, the way Jake had dismissed him without a second thought. Like Marcus was less than the cardboard he'd been holding. He'd seen that look before, growing up in a neighborhood where folks crossed the street when he walked by, where teachers skipped over his raised hand. He'd clawed his way out of that, built a fortune to prove it didn't define him. But here it was again, slinking through his own store like a ghost he couldn't shake. The couple wheeled their cart away, Jake trailing them with a bounce in his step, and Marcus felt the weight settle in his gut. This wasn't a fluke. It was a crack in the foundation, a hint of something uglier bubbling beneath the surface. He turned away, shoving his hands into his pockets, the rough denim grounding him as he mapped his next move. He'd test more, push harder, see how deep this rot ran. Jake's snub was a spark, not the fire, and Marcus wasn't about to let it flicker out. He'd come here expecting hiccups, maybe some sloppy service or a tired cashier, but this was different. This was personal, a slap that hit harder because it came from a place he'd poured his life into. He glanced back at Jake, now rearranging a stack of mugs with that same bored slouch, and felt a resolve harden inside him. One encounter didn't tell the whole story, but it was enough to make him question everything he thought he knew about this place. He'd built Langston Living to be a haven, a spot where money talked and skin didn't. But maybe that was just the dream he'd sold himself. The truth was out there, waiting in the aisles, and Marcus was damn well going to find it, even if it meant staring down every smirking face until he did. The day was young. The store was alive, and he wasn't walking away until he'd seen it all. Marcus Langston drifted away from the kitchen section, the sting of Jake's dismissal still buzzing under his skin like a fresh burn. But he wasn't ready to call it quits. The store stretched out before him, a maze of polished wood and soft lighting, every corner humming with the clatter of carts and the rustle of shopping bags. He needed something to counterbalance the sour taste Jake had left, a sign that his vision for Langston Living hadn't completely eroded. His sneakers squeaked faintly against the tiles as he wove through the crowd, past a towering display of pastel bedspreads and a bin overflowing with discount spatulas. The air carried a faint whiff of cinnamon from a candle aisle, mingling with the sharp tang of new electronics, pulling him toward the checkout lanes. That's where he spotted her, a black cashier standing behind a register, her navy vest crisp and her movements steady as she scanned a customer's stack of throw blankets. Her name tag gleamed under the fluorescent lights, reading Lena, etched in bold white letters. Marcus slowed his pace, letting himself blend into the line of shoppers, a worn canvas bag slung over his shoulder to sell the disguise. He needed a test, something simple to gauge her. So he grabbed a boxy table lamp from a nearby end cap, its shade a muted gray that caught his eye, and stepped up to her station. Lena looked up as he set the lamp on the counter, her face breaking into a warm smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Hey there," she said, her voice smooth and inviting, like she'd been waiting all day to help someone. "Find everything okay?" Marcus nodded, keeping his tone casual, and pointed at the lamp. "Yeah. Just wondering if this thing's worth it. Does it hold up?" Lena tilted her head, studying the box with a quick, practiced glance, then leaned in like she was sharing a secret. "Oh, this one's solid. I've got the same model at home. Been running for 2 years straight, no flicker. Perfect for a late-night read or if you're just vibe-checking your living room." She chuckled, a soft sound that eased the knot in Marcus's chest, and flipped the box to show him the specs printed on the side. 40 watts, adjustable brightness. Even comes with a bulb. You won't be disappointed. Marcus felt a flicker of relief spark inside him, a tiny glow against the dark cloud Jake had cast. This was it, the warmth he'd poured into this company years ago. The kind of care he'd trained his first hires to show every soul who walked through those doors. Lena slid the lamp into a bag, her fingers quick but gentle, and handed it over. With a nod, "Anything else I can help you with?" she asked, her gaze steady, like she genuinely meant it. Marcus shook his head, offering a quiet thanks, and stepped away, the weight of the bag grounding him as he lingered near a rack of dish towels to watch her work. She moved with a rhythm, greeting each customer with that same easy smile, her voice cutting through the store's hum like a lifeline. An older man with a cane shuffled up next, fumbling with a stack of placemats, and Lena was on it, patient as he rambled about his granddaughter's new apartment. "Thesey'll look great in her kitchen," she said, folding them neatly into his bag, her tone lifting his gruff mumble into a grin. Marcus's lips twitched upward, a rare moment of pride swelling in his chest. Lena was the real deal, a living echo of the values he'd scribbled on napkins back when this was all a dream. Maybe the store wasn't a total lost cause, maybe there were still pockets of light holding strong against whatever rot Jake represented. He turned to head deeper into the aisles, ready to test more, when a sharp snippet of conversation sliced through his thoughts, stopping him cold. It came from behind a towering shelf of mixing bowls, to voices low but biting, unmistakable in their venom. "She's too friendly with those customers," one said, the words dripping with a sneer Marcus knew too well. He edged closer, peering through a gap in the display, and there was Jake, leaning against a cart, his sandy hair flopping as he jerked his chin toward Lena's register. The other voice belonged to a stocky guy with a buzz cut, his vest sagging as he smirked back at Jake. "Yeah, always kissing up to them. Waste of time, if you ask me," Jake snorted, folding his arms like he'd just dropped some grand wisdom. "She's clueless. They don't tip, don't buy big, just clog the line." Marcus's blood ran hot, his fingers curling into fists inside his pockets as he watched Lena, oblivious, ring up a young mom with a toddler tugging at her sleeve. The mom laughed as Lena cooed at the kid, handing over a sticker from behind the counter. But Jake's words painted it all in a different light, twisting her kindness into something cheap, something lesser. Marcus's jaw locked tight, the air around him thickening with a fury he hadn't felt since he'd stared at that slur on his windshield. This wasn't just about him anymore. Lena was catching the same bile. Her warmth mocked because of who she was, who her customers were. The flicker of hope he'd clung to sputtered, drowned out by the ugly truth slithering between those shelves. He'd thought he'd found an ally, a piece of his vision still alive, but now he saw her as a target, undermined by the same poison that had brushed him off earlier. His eyes flicked back to Lena, still smiling, still steady, and then to Jake, now kicking at a stray box like he owned the place. The contrast was a gut punch, a maw opening wider the longer he stood there. How many others felt this way? Was Lena the exception, or just the one dumb enough to care? He'd come here to test his staff, sure, but this was a mirror held up to his whole damn company, reflecting cracks he'd never wanted to see. The bag in his hand felt heavier now, the lamp a mocking reminder of a moment that had turned sour too fast. He could have stormed over, ripped into Jake right then, but that'd blow his cover, and he wasn't done digging. This was bigger than one punk kid, bigger than a single snub. It was a culture, a sickness, and Lena's light only made the shadows darker. His pulse hammered, a mix of rage and betrayal churning as he replayed Jake's words, the casual cruelty of it all. He'd thought he'd won something small with Lena, a foothold to cling to. But now that relief was ash, replaced by a fire he couldn't douse. He had to push further, had to know how deep this ran, even if every step cut a little deeper into what he'd built. Hey, folks, what do you think? Comment number 1, if you're raging at Jake's two-faced attitude, or number 2 if you're rooting for Lena to keep shining. Hit that like button if you're fed up with seeing good people dragged down, and subscribe to catch how this mess unfolds. Was Lena's kindness a fluke in a toxic pit? Or is there more fight left in this store? Imagine you're Marcus, staring at this betrayal. What's your next move? Drop your thoughts below, because this roller coaster's just getting started. So, what's Marcus about to stumble into when he takes this fight to the next level? Marcus Langston stood near the dish towel rack, the weight of Lena's lamp bag pulling at his shoulder. But it was Jake's venomous words that anchored him in place, replaying in his skull like a scratched record. The kid's sneer, the way he'd mocked Lena for daring to care. It wasn't just a jab at her. It was a middle finger to everything Marcus had built Langston living to be. His fingers twitched inside his pockets, the rough denim scraping his knuckles as he fought the urge to rip off his cap and storm the aisles, bellowing his title until the walls shook. But that wasn't the play, not yet. He needed more. Needed to push this festering wound until it bled truth. Jake was still over by the mixing bowls, slouched against that cart, his sandy hair flopping as he scrolled his phone, oblivious to the fire he'd lit. Marcus's chest tightened, a slow boil simmering beneath his ribs, and he knew he couldn't just walk away. He had to test this kid again, had to draw the poison out into the open. He squared his shoulders, adjusted the faded jacket clinging to his frame, and started back toward the kitchen section, each step a drumbeat of purpose echoing in his ears. The store buzzed around him, a Saturday symphony of squeaking wheels and chattering voices, but Marcus tuned it out, his focus narrowing to a laser point. He spotted Jake near a tower of blunders, the same spot where that first snub had landed, and the irony wasn't lost on him. Perfect. He grabbed a stainless steel toaster from a nearby shelf, its surface cool and slick under his grip, and carried it over like a prop in a play he was rewriting on the fly. Jake didn't look up at first, his thumb flicking across his screen, the glow casting shadows on his pinched face. Marcus cleared his throat, loud enough to cut through the hum, and held up the toaster. "Hey man," he said, keeping his voice even but firm. "I'm trying to figure out if this is worth buying. Can you help me out?" Jake's eyes flicked up, slow and lazy, and that smirk crept back, curling his lips like he'd just heard a bad joke. He straightened a fraction, barely, and let out a huff that was more scoff than breath. "What's there to figure out? It's a toaster. Buy it or don't." The words snapped out, sharp and dismissive, and Marcus felt the heat flare in his gut, but he held his ground, refusing to let it show. He tilted his head, locking eyes with Jake, and pressed harder. "Look, I just want to know if it's decent. I'm not asking for a life story, just some help." Jake's smirk faltered for a split second, replaced by a flash of irritation, and then he stepped closer, close enough that Marcus could smell the faint tang of cheap cologne clinging to his vest. "You don't belong here," Jake spat, his voice low but slicing, each syllable dripping with contempt. "Take your questions somewhere else." The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken venom, and Marcus's pulse hammered, his mind reeling at the sheer audacity. This wasn't just rudeness, it was a line drawn in the sand, a shove that dared him to push back. Jake turned on, his heel, sneakers scuffing the floor, and strutted off toward a cluster of saucepans, leaving Marcus standing there, toaster still in hand. The weight of those words sinking deep into his bones. He set the appliance down, slow and deliberate, his breath steadying as he processed what had just happened. Jake hadn't whispered it, hadn't hid it. He'd said it loud enough for anyone nearby to catch, and that's when Marcus noticed. The stairs, a woman in a green sweater paused her cart mid-aisle, her eyebrows raised, lips parted in a silent gasp. A guy with a buzz cut and a kid on his hip smirked, nudging his wife like it was some private show. An older man with a stack of baking sheets glanced over, his face tight with something Marcus couldn't read, pity or scorn, maybe both. The attention prickled his skin, a spotlight he hadn't asked for, and he realized this wasn't just between him and Jake anymore. It was public, a scene painted in broad strokes, and the crowd's reactions told a story of their own. Some looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight, eyes darting away, but others leaned into it, their silence louder than words. Marcus's jaw clenched, the unfairness of it clawing at him, because he knew what Jake saw. A black guy in beat-up clothes, not worth the time, not worth the space. It was the same script he'd faced 100 times growing up, but here, in his own store, it hit different, a betrayal that cut to the marrow. He'd won, hadn't he? Jake had backed off, retreated like a dog with its tail tucked, and for a fleeting second, Marcus felt the rush of it, the small thrill of standing his ground and watching the kid fold. But that rush evaporated fast, replaced by a cold prickle creeping up his spine. He turned his head, slow and careful, and caught a figure watching from the far end of the aisle, a hulking shape framed by a wall of cast-iron skillets. The man was massive, shoulders broad enough to block the light. His navy vest stretched tight across a barrel chest. His name tag glinted, Victor, pinned above a pocket stuffed with pens. And his face was all hard lines, a jaw like concrete and eyes narrowed to slits. Marcus didn't know him, not personally, but he'd seen that type before. Ex-cop vibes radiating off him like heat off asphalt. Victor's gaze wasn't casual. It was a hunter's stare, locked on Marcus with an intensity that made the air feel heavy. He didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, one hand resting on a shelf, the other slipping into his pocket to pull out a phone. His thick fingers tapped the screen, quick and deliberate, and Marcus's gut twisted, a warning bell clanging in his head. This wasn't random. Jake's little tantrum had drawn eyes, and those eyes belonged to someone who didn't look happy about it. Marcus forced his breathing to stay even, his mind racing as he pieced it together. Victor wasn't just some floor manager clocking hours. He was trouble, the kind that didn't let slights slide. That stare, that text, it was a move, a chess piece sliding into place. And Marcus had just painted a target on his back without meaning to. He'd thought he'd won, thought pushing Jake would give him clarity, but now he saw the ripple, the way it had stirred something bigger, something meaner. Victor's lips twitched, not quite a smile, more a promise. And Marcus felt the floor shift under him, the victory souring into a trap he couldn't see yet. He turned away, casual as he could manage, and drifted toward a display of cutting boards, his pulse thudding in his ears. The store kept humming, carts rolling, voices chattering, but it felt distant now, like static behind the roar of his own thoughts. He'd come here to test his people, to feel out the cracks, but this was no crack, this was a chasm. And he just stepped right into it. Jake was back by the saucepans, kicking at that stray box again, his slouch deeper, like he'd already forgotten the whole thing. But Marcus hadn't, and Victor sure as hell hadn't. That hulking shadow lingered in his peripheral, a weight he couldn't shake, and he knew this wasn't over. He'd stood up, sure, landed a blow, but it had cost him something he couldn't name yet. The toaster sat abandoned on the shelf, a mute witness to the line he'd crossed. And Marcus's hands flexed at his sides, itching to do more, to push harder. But a voice in his head whispered caution. What had Victor typed? Who was on the other end? The store felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. And Marcus realized he'd misjudged the game. He'd wanted truth, and he'd gotten it. Raw and jagged, but it came with teeth, and those teeth were watching him. He moved on, slow and steady, but the chill stayed, a shadow trailing his every step. And he knew whatever came next wouldn't be as simple as a smirking kid walking away. Marcus Langston kept his steps measured as he drifted away from the cutting boards. The echo of Jake's "you don't belong here" still ringing in his ears. But it was Victor's shadow that loomed larger now, a dark cloud he couldn't outrun. The store pulsed around him, a Saturday swarm of shoppers oblivious to the storm brewing in his chest. The clatter of carts and the chime of registers blurred into a dull roar. But his focus stayed sharp, replaying that moment when Victor's thick fingers danced across his phone screen. That wasn't a casual text, not with that hunter's stare pinning Marcus like a bug on a board. He'd pushed Jake, gotten a win, but the air felt thicker now, charged with something uglier than a punk kid's attitude. He tugged his cap lower, the brim brushing his brow, and angled toward the bedding section, weaving through a knot of moms debating pillow firmness. His canvas bag swung lightly against his hip, the lamp inside a quiet reminder of Lena's warmth. But even that felt distant under the weight of Victor's gaze. He needed space, needed to think, but the store wouldn't let him breathe. A potential snare. He paused near a stack of comforters, their plastic wrappers crinkling under his touch as he pretended to browse, his eyes flicking sideways to track the hulking manager. Victor hadn't moved much, still posted near those skillets, but his head was tilted now, ear pressed to his phone, lips moving in a low mutter Marcus couldn't catch. The guy's size alone was intimidating, a wall of muscle packed into that navy vest. But it was the vibe that set Marcus's nerves on edge, ex-cop written all over him. The kind who thrived on control. Marcus turned away, forcing his shoulders to relax, and ran his fingers along a quilted throw, its texture rough against his skin. He'd come here to test his people, not to start a war, but Jake's outburst had lit a fuse, and Victor looked ready to fan the flames. The thought gnawed at him. What had he stepped into? He'd wanted truth, sure, but this felt like stepping on a hornet's nest, and the buzzing was getting louder. He moved deeper into the aisle, putting a tower of folded sheets between him and Victor, but the prickling at the back of his neck didn't fade. Then it happened, fast and heavy, like a truck barreling out of nowhere. Victor's voice cut through the store's hum, loud and commanding, a bullhorn in a library. "Hey, you, stop right there." Marcus froze, his hands still on the quilt, his pulse kicking up as he turned his head just enough to see Victor storming toward him, boots thudding on the tiles. The man's face was a mask of fury, eyes blazing, and Marcus's gut sank, instinct screaming trap. Shoppers parted like water, their carts squealing as they cleared a path, some craning their necks, others scurrying away. Victor closed the gap in seconds, towering over Marcus, his breath hot and sour as he jabbed a finger into Marcus's chest. "You're harassing my staff," he barked, loud enough to bounce off the ceiling. "I saw you mouthing off to Jake, causing trouble." Marcus blinked, the accusation slamming into him like a brick, and he opened his mouth to protest. But Victor steamrolled right over him. "Don't even try it. I've had enough of punks like you thinking you can waltz in here and stir shit up." The words hit harder than the finger, laced with a venom Marcus knew too well, the kind that didn't need to say black to mean it. His mind raced, replaying the scene with Jake, the toaster, the stairs, but this was a leap, a wild swing from a snub to a full-on attack. Victor's bulk blocked the aisle, his shadow swallowing the light, and Marcus felt the walls of his own store closing in, a cage he'd built turning against him. "I wasn't harassing anyone," he said, keeping his voice low, steady, though his blood boiled beneath it. "I asked a question, that's all." Victor's lips curled, a smirk that didn't reach his eyes, and he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a growl only Marcus could hear. "Bullshit. I know your type, always pushing, never happy. You're done here." The slur slipped out under his breath, a hissed boy that landed like a slap, and Marcus's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms as he fought to keep his cool. This wasn't just a power trip. It was personal, a line crossed with no hesitation. Shoppers gawked, a ring of faces forming around them, some clutching their bags tighter, others whispering behind their hands. A teen with a stack of pillows stared wide-eyed, her phone half raised like she might record it. Marcus caught the glint of judgment in their eyes, the quick math of faded jacket plus dark skin equaling trouble. and it twisted the knife deeper. He'd seen this play out before, on street corners, in classrooms, but here, in his own damn empire, that was a fresh cut, raw and bleeding. Victor straightened, crossing his arms, his vest creaking under the strain, and barked again, loud for the crowd. "I'm calling security. You're out." Marcus raised his hands, slow and deliberate, playing the meek card even as his insides churned. "No need. I'll go," he said, stepping back, his sneakers scuffing the floor as he turned toward the exit. Victor's smirk widened, a predator savoring the retreat, and Marcus felt the burn of it, the sting of folding when every fiber screamed to fight. But he wasn't blowing his cover, not yet. Not until he knew the full scope of this mess. He made it 10 steps, the betting owl shrinking behind him when Victor's voice boomed again, this time into a radio clip to his belt. "Security, we've got a problem. Guy in a gray jacket, headed your way, suspected theft. Keep an eye on him." Marcus's stomach dropped, the lie so blatant it stole his breath. Theft. He hadn't touched a damn thing beyond that toaster, and even that was back on the shelf, untouched. He kept walking, head down, the exit looming ahead, its glass doors glinting under the midday sun. The crowd thinned as he neared it, shoppers peeling off to their carts and lists, but the weight of Victor's words clung to him, a noose tightening with every step. He dodged the confrontation, slipped out of Victor's grip, and for a moment, he thought he'd won again, a clean break to regroup and plan. His hand brushed the door handle, cool metal under his palm, and he pushed it open, the warm Atlanta air rushing in to meet him. Freedom, or so he thought, a chance to breathe and figure out how deep this rot ran. But then he heard it, the crackle of that radio again, Victor's voice faint but sharp, drifting out from the store. "Yeah, gray jacket. Check his bag. Bet he's got something." Marcus's blood ran cold, his grip tightening on the lamp bag as he stepped into the parking lot, the asphalt shimmering under the heat. He glanced back, just once, and saw Victor through the glass, phone back to his ear, that smirk still plastered on his face, eyes locked on Marcus like a hawk on prey. The bastard wasn't letting it go, wasn't satisfied with running him off. This was a setup, a counterpunch for daring to push back, and it was coming fast. Marcus's mind spun, calculating his next move, but the victory he'd felt slipped away, replaced by a dread that coiled tight around his ribs. He'd escaped the aisle, sure, but Victor had just raised the stakes, turned a snub into a hunt, and Marcus was the target now, not just some random shopper. The parking lot stretched out before him, cars glinting in the sun, but it didn't feel safe anymore, not with that radio crackling and Victor's malice chasing him out the door. He'd wanted truth, and he'd gotten it, but it came with claws, and those claws were closing in. Marcus Langston stepped into the Atlanta parking lot, the midday sun glaring off windshields, but the heat couldn't touch the ice settling in his veins. Victor's radio crackle echoed in his head, that smug check his bag order a dagger. Twisting deeper with every step, he clutched the canvas bag tighter, Lena's lamp inside a lifeline, to a moment that felt a lifetime ago, and scanned the lot. His cap low, his pulse a drumbeat against his ribs. The store doors hissed shut behind him, a glass wall between him and the chaos he'd stirred. But safety was a mirage, shimmering just out of reach. Shoppers streamed past, their arms loaded with bags, their chatter a dull buzz, oblivious to the noose tightening around him. He'd dodged Victor's fist in there, slipped out before the ex-cop could pin him down. But that theft lie wasn't a bluff, it was a promise. And Marcus knew promises like that didn't fade quietly. He aimed for his car, 3 rows over, its shattered windshield a beacon of the hate he'd walked into, but his legs felt heavy, each stride a battle against the dread clawing up his spine. He'd wanted truth, sure, but this was a beast he hadn't braced for, and it was closing in fast. He made it halfway, weaving between a minivan and a pickup, when the shout hit him like a gunshot. "Hey, stop right there!" Marcus's head snapped up, and there they were, 2 security guards barreling toward him, their black polos stretched tight over beefy frames, radios squawking at their hips. The taller one, a guy with a buzz cut and a scar slicing his brow, pointed a meaty finger, his voice booming across the lot. "You, gray jacket, don't move." Marcus froze, his sneakers skidding on the asphalt, his breath catching as a crowd began to form, shoppers pausing mid-stride, their eyes wide with curiosity. The second guard, shorter but weary, flanked him, hand hovering near a baton. His face twisted in a scowl that screamed trouble. Marcus raised his hands slow, palms out, the bag dangling from his wrist, and kept his tone even, though his heart slammed against his chest. "What's this about?" "I'm just leaving." The tall one stepped closer, close enough Marcus could smell the sweat on him, and barked, "We gotta report you stole something." "Hand over the bag." The lie landed, hard, Victor's voice echoing through it, and Marcus's gut churned, the setup crystal clear now. He lowered the bag to the ground, slow and deliberate, his eyes locked on the tall guards. "I didn't steal anything," he said, firm but calm, though the fury bubbled beneath it. "Check it. See for yourself." The weary one snatched it, ripping the zipper open with a snarl, and dumped the lamp onto the pavement, its box thudding against the asphalt. Lena's words about its brightness flashed through Marcus's mind, a cruel irony as the guard rummaged, finding nothing else. "That's it," the tall one grunted, squinting at the box, but before Marcus could answer, a new figure pushed through the growing ring of onlookers. Victor, the manager, strode up, his boots pounding the ground, his massive frame parting the crowd like a ship through waves. His smirk was gone, replaced by a cold, calculated glare, and he held up a small toaster, its silver surface glinting in the sun. "Found this in the aisle after you left," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, his voice dripping with fake concern. "Stuffed in a shelf like someone was hiding it." Marcus's jaw dropped, the absurdity hitting him like a slap, because he'd left that toaster right where it belonged, untouched. The crowd murmured, a low hum of typical and should have known rippling through them, their faces a mix of scorn and thrill, phones popping up to catch the drama. Marcus's skin burned under their stares, the weight of their assumptions, crushing because he knew what they saw, a black guy in a beat-up jacket, caught red-handed in their eyes. "That's a lie," he snapped, his voice rising despite himself. "I didn't take that." "You're setting me up." Victor's eyes narrowed, a flicker of triumph flashing in them, and he tossed the toaster into Marcus's bag with a casual flick, the metal clanging against the lamp box. "Looks like evidence to me," he said, crossing his arms, his vest creaking as he nodded to the guards. "Take him in. Let the cops sort it." The tall guard grabbed Marcus's arm, his grip iron tight, while the weary one circled behind, cutting off any escape. Marcus twisted, pulling against the hold, but the crowd pressed closer, their whispers a chorus of judgment, and he felt the trap snap shut, Victor's plan locking him in. "I've got a receipt," Marcus said, digging into his pocket with his free hand, yanking out the crumpled paper Lena had handed him. "For the lamp. Check it." He thrust it at the tall guard, who snatched it, squinting at the ink, his scowl deepening as he read. The weary one hesitated, glancing at Victor, but the manager's face didn't budge, just that cold stare boring into Marcus. "Doesn't prove shit about the toaster," Victor growled, stepping closer, his bulk looming. "You're a thief, plain and simple." The tall guard grunted, handing the receipt back, and loosened his grip, but only slightly. "Receipt checks out for the lamp," he muttered, almost reluctant, and Marcus seized the crack, pulling free and stepping back, his breath ragged. "Then let me go," he said, voice steady now. "You've got nothing else." The guards exchanged a look, the crowd's him shifting to confusion, and Victor's jaw tightened, a vein pulsing in his neck. "Fine," the tall one said, waving him off. "Get out of here." Marcus grabbed his bag, the lamp box dented but intact, and turned, his legs shaky but moving, the crowd parting slow as he headed for his car. He made it 20 feet, the guard's footsteps fading, the onlookers drifting back to their lives, when he heard Victor's voice again, low and furious, speaking into his phone. "Yeah, he's out, but we're not done. Get it ready." Marcus didn't look back, didn't dare, but the words sank into him, a promise darker than the theft frame-up. He'd talked his way out, flashed that receipt like a shield, and walked, free, a win that should have felt good. A punch landed against Victor's smug face, but it didn't. His car loomed ahead, glass still shattered, and he slid inside, slamming the door, his hands trembling as he gripped the wheel. The victory was hollow, a flicker snuffed out by that phone call. Because Victor wasn't letting this go, wasn't satisfied with a public shaming. Marcus had slipped the noose, sure, but the rope was still out there, tightening for something bigger, something meaner. He'd come to test his store, to feel its pulse, but now he was the prey, hunted in his own domain, and the truth he'd chased was a blade swinging back at him. All right, what's your take on this? Comment number 1 if you're pissed Victor's framing Marcus like this. Or number 2 if you think Marcus should have fought harder right there. Smash that like button if you're rooting for him to turn this around, and subscribe to see how he battles back. Was that receipt enough to save him, or did it just delay the inevitable? Tell me below, because this fight's heating up fast. So, what's Victor cooking up with that phone call, and how's Marcus going to dodge the next blow? Marcus Langston slumped in his car, the driver's seat creaking under him as he stared at the shattered windshield, the jagged edges framing a parking lot that felt more like a battlefield now. His hands still shook, the crumpled receipt for Lena's lamp stuffed back in his pocket, a flimsy shield that had barely gotten him out of Victor's trap. The Atlanta sun beat down, turning the air thick and sticky, but it couldn't thaw the chill in his bones. Victor's last words on that phone call looping in his head. Get it ready. He'd slipped the theft frame up, walked away with his dignity bruised but intact, and for a fleeting second, he'd thought he could regroup, maybe even laugh at how close he'd cut it. But the lot wasn't empty, not anymore. 3 shadows moved between the cars, closing in fast, their strides purposeful, their silhouettes sharp against the glare. Marcus's gut twisted, instinct kicking in before his brain caught up, and he locked the doors, the click loud in the silence. But it was too late to run. They were here, and they weren't shoppers. The first guy reached him in seconds, a lean figure in a stained tank top, his arms roped with muscle, a baseball bat swinging loose in his grip. 2 more flanked him, one stocky with a shaved head and a crowbar, the other weary with a face full of stubble and a tire iron clenched tight. They didn't speak at first, just circled the car like wolves, their eyes glinting with a hunger Marcus knew too well. He fumbled for his keys, the metal slipping in his sweaty palm. But before he could jam them into the ignition, the bat crashed down on the hood, a deafening clang that shook the frame. "Get out, asshole," the lean one shouted, his voice raw and jagged, spit flecking the cracked windshield. Marcus's heart slammed against his ribs, his breath shallow as he scanned their faces, searching for a clue, but he didn't need one. Victor's smirk flashed in his mind, that phone call. This was it, the ready he'd promised. And it wasn't a warning, it was a hit. The stocky one pounded the crowbar against the passenger window, glass spiderwebbing under the blow, and Marcus flinched, his hands up, stalling for time. "What the hell do you want?" he yelled, voice steady despite the quake inside. The weary one grinned, teeth yellowed and crooked, and leaned in close, tire iron tapping the roof. "You pissed off the wrong guy, that's what," he sneered. And then it came, the word Marcus had braced for, nigger. It hit like a punch, sharp and deliberate, and the others laughed, a guttural sound that drowned out the distant hum of the lot. "Think you can strut around mouthing off?" the lean one added, swinging the bat again, this time denting the fender with a screech of metal. "Victor says you need a lesson." Marcus's blood ran hot, then cold, the name dropping like a bomb. Confirmation this wasn't random. This was revenge, personal and vicious. Shoppers lingered at the edges, some frozen mid-step, others pulling out phones, their lenses glinting like vulture eyes, but no one moved to help. No one shouted for security. The crowd was a wall of silence, complicit in their stillness, and Marcus felt the weight of it. The isolation, the way his skin marked him as fair game in their eyes. He gripped the wheel, knuckles whitening, and calculated, 3 against 1. No weapons, no backup, just him and a car that wouldn't start fast enough. The stocky one smashed the crowbar again, shattering the passenger window this time. Glass raining into the seat, and Marcus ducked, shards biting his arm as he lunged for the door handle. He shoved it open, tumbling out onto the asphalt, his sneakers skidding as he rolled to his feet, adrenaline surging. "Back off," he roared, fists up. His voice a crack of thunder, but they didn't flinch, just closed in tighter, their weapons raised. The lean one swung first, the bat whizzing through the air, and Marcus dodged, the wood grazing his shoulder with a thud that jolted his bones. He swung back, a wild hook that caught the guy's jaw, sending him staggering, but the weary one was on him fast, tire iron slamming into his ribs, a white-hot burst of pain that stole his breath. Marcus gasped, stumbling, and the stocky one charged, crowbar arcing down toward his skull. He threw himself sideways, the metal cracking the pavement where he'd been, and scrambled up, blood trickling from a cut on his lip, his vision blurring. But sharp with rage, this wasn't a lesson, it was a lynching, a public execution fueled by Victor's hate, and the crowd just watched, filming, their silence louder than the blows. He fought back, raw and desperate, ducking another swing from the bat and driving his elbow into the lean one's gut, doubling him over with a wheeze. The weary one lunged, tire iron flashing, but Marcus caught his wrist, twisting hard until the weapon clattered free and kicked it under a car, out of reach. The stocky one roared, charging again, crowbar high, and Marcus sidestepped, grabbing the guy's arm and using his momentum to slam him into the pickup's tailgate. A sickening crunch as his head hit steel. They were down to two now, panting, circling, but Marcus was bleeding, his ribs screaming, his strength fading under the onslaught. The lean one recovered, bat swinging wild, and caught Marcus's thigh, a dull crack that dropped him to one knee, pain searing through him like fire. He gritted his teeth, lunging up with a fist that smashed the guy's nose, blood spurting as he howled. And for a second, Marcus thought he'd break free, thought he'd won. He staggered toward his car, the door still gaping, keys glinting on the seat. But the weary one tackled him from behind, slamming him face first into the asphalt, gravel biting his cheek as the tire iron loomed again. The crowd gasped, a collective intake, but still no one moved, their phones steady, capturing every grunt, every blow. Marcus twisted, kicking out, his heel catching the weary one's shin, toppling him, and rolled free. Clawing to his feet, he ran, limping, breath ragged, blood dripping down his chin. The car too far now, the lot a blur of metal and faces. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing, and the three thugs hesitated, glancing at each other, weapons lowering. Next time, you're dead, the lean one spat, wiping his bloody nose. And they bolted, vanishing between cars as the crowd finally stirred, murmuring, dispersing like smoke. Marcus collapsed against a sedan, his chest heaving, his body a map of bruises, the lamp bag abandoned somewhere in the chaos. He'd survived, fought them off, a win carved out of pain and grit, but those sirens weren't comfort, they were a warning. Victor's hand was in this, deep and dirty, and the cops closing in weren't here to save him. Not with that ex-cop pulling strings. He'd escaped the mob, sure, but the real fight was roaring closer, and it had hit harder than any bat. He pushed off the car, wincing as his ribs protested, and stumbled toward the lot's edge, away from his shattered ride, away from the eyes still lingering. Blood smeared his jacket, his lip throbbing, but his mind was clear, razor sharp with fury and resolve. This wasn't just about Jake's snub or Victor's frame-up anymore. This was war, a brutal, public declaration that he wasn't welcome in his own domain. The crowd's silence burned worse than the blows, their inaction a mirror to the hate that had spawned this, and Marcus felt it settle into him, a scar that had outlasted the bruises. He'd thought he'd won when he walked out of the store, thought he'd dodged Victor's net, but this was the counterpunch. A savage reminder that they wouldn't stop, wouldn't let him breathe. The sirens grew louder, red and blue lights flickering at the lot's entrance, and Marcus ducked behind a van, his breath hitching as he realized the truth. He wasn't free, he was hunted, and whatever came next would make this beating look like a warm-up. Marcus Langston crouched behind the van, his battered body pressed against the warm metal, the sting of gravel still embedded in his cheek as he sucked in shallow breaths. The sirens screamed closer, red and blue lights slashing through the Atlanta parking lot, painting the asphalt in frantic streaks. His ribs throbbed, a sharp ache with every inhale, and blood crusted his lip, the taste metallic and bitter. But he couldn't move yet, couldn't risk those lights spotting him. The mob's retreat echoed in his ears, their parting threat: "Next time, you're dead." A jagged promise that hung heavy as the cops rolled in. He'd fought them off, clawed his way out of that beating, a win carved from sheer will. But those sirens weren't salvation. They were Victor's next play, and Marcus knew it in his bones. He peeked around the van's edge, his cap lost somewhere. In the scuffle, his jacket smeared with dirt and blood. Two patrol cars screeched to a stop near his shattered sedan. Doors flying open as four officers spilled out, their boots pounding the ground. Radios crackling with static. Marcus's pulse hammered, his mind racing, because this wasn't random, this was orchestrated. And he was still the prey, the lead cop. A stocky guy with a graying buzz cut and a badge glinting on his chest barked orders, his voice cutting through the fading crowd. Gray jacket, suspect in an assault, check the area. Marcus's stomach lurched, the word assault twisting the knife, because he'd been the one bleeding, not swinging first. He ducked lower, his bruised thigh screaming as he shifted, and watched them fan out. Flashlights sweeping the lot. Shoppers lingered at the edges, some pointing toward his car, others shuffling away, their phones still out, evidence of his fight. Now ammo for whatever Victor had spun. Then he saw him, the hulking manager striding from the store, his navy vest stretched tight, his face a mask of grim satisfaction as he approached the lead cop. Victor's voice carried, low but deliberate. "That's his car, got jumped by some guys he started trouble with inside. Probably high, erratic. You know the type." Marcus's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms, because the lie was so smooth, so practiced. It turned his beating into his crime, his blood into guilt. The cop nodded, jotting something on a pad, and Marcus felt the world tilt, the system snapping into place against him. He couldn't stay hidden, not with them closing in. So he stood, slow and stiff, and stepped out, hands raised, his voice hoarse but firm. "I'm right here, and I didn't assault anyone." The cop spun, hands dropping to holsters, and the lead one advanced, his eyes narrowing as he sized Marcus up, bloodied jacket and all. "You the guy in the gray?" he snapped, and Marcus nodded, keeping his hands high, the lamp bag long gone in the chaos. "Yeah, but I'm the one who got attacked. 3 guys with weapons. Check the footage," Victor cut in, stepping forward, his bulk looming beside the cop. "He's lying, officer. Caused a scene in my store, then picked a fight out here. Those guys were just defending themselves." The words dripped with venom, each one a nail in Marcus's coffin, and the cop's face hardened, his hand resting on his cuffs. "Got witnesses saying you threw the first punch," he said, jerking his chin toward the crowd, and Marcus's heart sank, because he knew those phones hadn't caught the full story, just the pieces Victor wanted seen. Before he could argue, the cuffs came out, cold steel snapping around his wrists, the click loud in his ears as the cop yanked his arms down. "You're under arrest for assault," the lead one said, shoving him toward the patrol car, while Victor watched, arms crossed, that smirk creeping back. Marcus twisted, his ribs flaring, and spat out, "This is bullshit. I'm the victim here." But the cop didn't flinch, just pushed him harder, the door slamming open as they forced him inside. The back seat smelled of sweat and vinyl, the partition caging him in, and through the window. He saw Victor pull the lead cop aside, their heads close, words too low to catch. The other officers circled his car, one peering at the shattered windshield. But no one asked questions, no one doubted Victor's tale. Marcus's mind spun, the racial script playing out like clockwork, ex-cop to cop. White word against black blood, and he was the thug in their eyes, not the man who'd built this damn place. The crowd dispersed, their interest fading, leaving him alone in the car, cuffs biting his wrists, the sting of betrayal sharper than the mob's blows. The ride to the station was a blur, the city streaking past in smears of color, the radio crackling with codes he couldn't decode. At booking, they took his prints, his mugshot, the flash blinding against his swollen face, and he demanded his call, voice steady despite the ache. He dialed Jamal, his lawyer buddy from college. A shark in a suit who'd owe him one after a favor years back. They've got me for assault, Marcus said, the words bitter, fabricated, Victor's. Behind it, need you now. Jamal didn't hesitate. Sit tight. I'm there in 20, and Marcus hung up. Slumping against the cell wall, the concrete cold through his torn jacket. Hours crawled by, the station a hum of phones and footsteps, until Jamal stormed in. Tie loose, briefcase swinging, his voice cutting through the desk chatter. Where's my client? This is a joke. Let me see the report. The lead cop shuffled over, tossing a file, and Jamal ripped through it, his eyes blazing as he grilled them. No body cam. No footage. You're holding him on a manager's word. And some shaky phones. Marcus watched from the cell, hope flickering as Jamal tore into the holes. The missing cameras, the lack of witnesses who'd back Victor's lie. The cop shifted, uneasy, and muttered, "Tech glitch." Cams were down, but Jamal didn't buy it. Slamming the file shut, "Release him, now, or I'll have this precinct in court by morning." The lead cop scowled, but the cuffs came off. The cell door swinging open, and Marcus walked out, rubbing his wrists, Jamal clapping his shoulder. "You're free, man. They've got nothing solid." The station air hit him, stale but sweet, and he nodded, a wind snatched from the jaws of defeat, Victor's plan crumbling under Jamal's heat. He stepped outside, the night cool against his bruised skin, and for a moment, he breathed, thinking he'd dodged the bullet, outsmarted the frame-up with a friend's sharp mind. But then he saw it, a news van parked across the street, its antenna spiking into the dark, a reporter already talking into a mic, her voice carrying, "Local man arrested after violent brawl at Langston Living, details emerging." Marcus froze, the freedom souring fast, because Victor wasn't done, not by a long shot. The station doors swung open behind him, and he caught the lead cop on his phone, voice low. "Yeah, he's out, tip them off." Marcus's blood ran cold, the pieces clicking, because this wasn't just about cuffs, it was about ruin. A public gutting to follow the physical one. He'd slipped the cell, sure, but the cameras rolling out there were Victor's next fist, and they'd hit harder than any mob. Jamal cursed under his breath, steering Marcus toward his car. "We'll fix this," but the weight settled in, heavy and unyielding. The law had turned on him, swallowed Victor's lie whole, and now the world would too, all because he dared to push back in his own store. The night stretched ahead, headlights slicing the dark, but Marcus knew this. Wind was a mirage, a breath before the real storm broke. Marcus Langston stood on the precinct steps, the night air cool against his bruised face. But the freedom he'd clawed back with Jamal's help felt like sand slipping through his fingers. The newsvan's lights glared across the street, a harsh white beam cutting through the dark, and the reporter's voice sliced into him, crisp and relentless. "Breaking news from Atlanta. A violent brawl at Langston Living tonight. Suspect released, but questions remain." Marcus's stomach dropped, the words twisting his fight for survival into a headline that painted him as the villain. Jamal gripped his arm, steering him toward a sleek black sedan parked curbside, his voice low and urgent. "Move, man, they're already spinning it." But Marcus couldn't look away. His eyes locked on the reporter, a blonde woman in a sharp blazer. Her mic thrust forward as she gestured toward the station. "Witnesses claim the man in gray assaulted 3 locals after a dispute inside the store," she said. Her tone clipped, authoritative, every syllable a nail in his coffin. He slid into Jamal's passenger seat, the door slamming shut, but the sound couldn't block out the truth. Victor had swung again, and this time, it was aimed at his soul. The drive was silent, the city blurring past in streaks of neon and shadow. But Marcus's mind roared, replaying the mob's blows, the cuffs, and now this. A public execution by camera. Jamal's phone buzzed non-stop, notifications lighting. Up the dash, and he cursed, glancing at Marcus. "It's viral already. Clips from the lot. Hashtag Langston Brawl trending." Marcus pulled his own phone, the cracked screen flickering as he opened the app, and there it was. A shaky video from some shopper's phone, him swinging at the lean thug, blood on his face, the bat crashing down out of frame. The caption read, "Caught stealing, then fighting. What's wrong with people?" Comments piled up, hundreds in minutes. Typical thug, should have stayed locked up. Ruining a good store. His chest tightened, each word a jab at the empire he'd built. The life he'd carved from nothing, now smeared with lies he couldn't outrun. He scrolled further, finding a news site link. Langston living shoplifter sparks chaos. And the byline credited a reliable source inside the store. Victor's fingerprints all over it, the ex-cop feeding a racist reporter the story she wanted. By morning, it was everywhere. TV screens in coffee shops, radio chatter. His phone buzzing with board members' panic texts. "Marcus, what the hell's this?" from his CFO. A clipped "call me now" from the PR head, and a terse step. Down until this clears from the chairman, a gray-haired suit who'd always doubted him. He sat in Jamal's downtown loft, the skyline glinting through the windows. A stark contrast to the storm inside. The TV blared a morning show to anchors, dissecting the incident, their faces pinched with Falk's concern. A man with a history of trouble, disrupting a family business, the woman said, flipping her hair, while her co-host nodded. Langston Living's reputation's taking a hit. Who's this guy? Marcus's fists clenched, his bruised knuckles whitening, because they couldn't know. He was the damn CEO, still undercover, still bleeding from a fight he didn't start. Jamal paced, phone to his ear, barking at a contact, "Get me the store footage, now. We're killing this." Marcus stared at the screen, the anchor's words a mirror to the crowd's silence. The cop's cuffs, a world ready to believe the worst because of his skin. The board call came at noon, a video conference that felt like a firing squad. 8 faces staring from his laptop, their ties crisp, their eyes cold. "This is a disaster," Marcus, the chairman, said, his voice gravelly, stocks dipping. "Sponsors pulling ads. We can't weather this." Marcus leaned in, his swollen lip throbbing, and kept his tone steady. "It's a setup. I was there. I've got proof." The CFO cut in, sharp and skeptical. "Proof? All we've got is you. On every channel looking like a criminal. Step back. Let us handle it." Marcus's jaw locked, the betrayal stinging worse than the bat, because these were his people, his inner circle, and they were folding, ready to cut him loose to save their bonuses. He hung up, the screen going black, and Jamal slammed a USB drive on the table. "Got it. Store cams from yesterday. Let's see what they caught." Marcus plugged it in, his hands steady despite the quake inside, and the grainy footage rolled. Him at Jake's counter, Victor's confrontation, the toaster lie, all of it. Clear as day, no assault, just him defending himself. They leaked it that afternoon, Jamal's team blasting it across socials. Truth behind Langston brawl, the clips cutting through the noise like sticking up. Comments shifting, "This guy's innocent. Cops screwed him." By evening, the news pivoted, the blonde reporter backpedaling. "New evidence suggests a misunderstanding." Her voice tight, reluctant. Marcus stood at Jamal's window, the city sprawling below, and felt the air shift. A wind clawing back his name, his pride. The board texted apologies, "We'll ride this out." And he exhaled, thinking he'd turned it, flipped Victor's script into dust. But then the call came, Jamal's phone lighting up, a neighbor near Marcus's house. "Your car's on fire, man, right now." Marcus bolted to the window, too far to see. But the dread hit hard, a fresh blow he hadn't braced for. Jamal drove, tires squealing, and they reached Marcus's street, flames licking the night sky. His SUV a torch, tires melting into the pavement, the stench of gasoline thick. A note fluttered nearby, "Stay out," scrawled in black marker. And Marcus knew, Victor again, the ex-cop's smirk burning brighter than the blaze. He stood there, the heat searing his bruised face, the crowd of neighbors gawking, phones out. Another video to twist. The footage had cleared him, sure, but this was the counterpunch, personal. Savage, a message that winning didn't mean surviving. Firefighters swarmed, hoses blasting, but the car was gone, a charred skeleton. And Marcus's resolve hardened. His empire under siege not just from within, but from a hate that wouldn't quit. Victor had lost the news war, so he'd struck closer, deeper, turning Marcus's life into ash. The night closed in, smoke curling into the stars, and Marcus felt the weight settle. A fight he couldn't walk away from, not now, not ever. He'd Thought he'd won, thought the truth would shield him, but this was Victor's game, and the rules were rigged to break him. Okay, folks, what's your verdict? Comment number 1 if you're furious Victor's torching Marcus's life like this, or number 2 if you think the board should have stuck by him from the jump. Hit that like button if you're cheering Marcus's fight against this filth, and subscribe to see how he battles back. Was clearing his name enough to stop this monster, or did it just light a bigger fuse? Drop your take below, because this war's getting wild. So, how's Marcus going to strike back when the flames die down, and what's Victor got up his sleeve next? Marcus Langston stood in the flickering glow of his burning SUV, the acrid stench of melted rubber and gasoline searing his nostrils. As the firefighters doused the last flames, the Atlanta night pressed in, thick with humidity and the murmur of neighbors, their silhouettes blurring against the dying firelight. His bruised hands hung limp at his sides, the note, "Stay out," crumpled in his pocket. Victor's latest jab still echoing in his skull. He'd cleared his name hours ago, the store footage turning the media tide. But this wasn't a win. It was a warning shot, a blaze that said Victor wouldn't stop until Marcus was ash too. Jamal stood beside him, his jaw tight, phone glowing. As he scrolled updates, "Cops are calling it arson. No leads yet." Marcus nodded, his swollen lip throbbing, but his mind was elsewhere, tracing the cracks in his empire. Because this wasn't just about one store anymore, it was personal, and the fight was bleeding into everything he'd built. He turned away from the wreckage, the charred frame a twisted monument to his defiance, and climbed into Jamal's sedan, the leather cool against his battered frame, ready to regroup, to strike back. The next morning hit like a freight train, his phone buzzing before dawn, texts piling up from Lena, the cashier who'd been his flicker of hope in that hellhole store. "They fired me, Mr. Langston. Said I stole cash. I didn't, I swear." Marcus bolted upright in Jamal's guest room, the sheets tangling around his legs, his ribs groaning as he grabbed the phone. "What? When?" He typed back, fingers shaking, and her reply came fast. "Yesterday. After you left." Victor pushed it through HR. "I'm out." His chest caved, a fresh wound opening, because Lena hadn't just been kind. She'd defended him to Jake, stood up when no one else would. And now she was collateral, a pawn Victor had smashed to spite him. He dialed her, the line crackling as she picked up, her voice small, cracked with exhaustion. "They said I took $50 from the till, pinned it on me after I told Jake to back off you." HR didn't even ask, just signed off. Marcus's breath hitched, the betrayal sinking deep, because this wasn't just Victor's doing. This was his own company, his people, bending to a bigot's whim without a fight. He hung up, promising Lena he'd fix it, and stormed to his laptop, the screen glowing harsh in the dim room as he pulled up the HR portal. There it was, her termination file, a curt note from Victor, caught stealing, immediate dismissal, stamped with approval from Sheila, the HR director he'd hired 5 years ago, a woman he'd trusted to keep the ship steady. No investigation, no questions, just a signature and a pink slip. Lena gone like she'd never mattered. Marcus's fists clenched, the bruises on his knuckles flaring as he dialed Sheila, her voice groggy when she answered. "Marcus, it's early, what's up?" He didn't waste time, his tone cutting like glass. "Why'd you fire Lena?" "Victor's word enough for you now," she stammered, caught off guard. "He said she stole, had proof." "I didn't think." Marcus cut her off. "Proof, where is it? You didn't check." Just let him axe her because she stood up to him. Sheila's silence was damning. A pause that stretched too long, and then she mumbled, "He's got pull, Marcus, I didn't want trouble." His blood boiled, the realization slamming home. His own team, scared of Victor's shadow, had sold out one of their own, and him by proxy. He slammed the laptop shut, the room spinning as he paced, Jamal watching from the doorway, coffee in hand, his eyes narrowing. "What's going on?" he asked, and Marcus spilled it. Lena's firing, Sheila's cowardice, the rot creeping into his company's core. "They're bending for him," he said, voice raw. "My own people. Letting him run roughshod because he's loud and white and mean." Jamal set the mug down hard, the clink echoing. "Then you take it back, man. Show them who's boss." Marcus nodded, his resolve hardening, and dug into the store footage again. Hours of tape he'd saved from the leak. There it was, Lena at her register, every transaction clean, no cash missing, just her smiling, helping, until Jake's snide voice cut in off-screen. Then Victor's looming figure later, whispering to a clerk. He cross-checked the till logs. Pristine, no $50 gone, just Victor's lie stamped as truth by a spineless HR. Marcus drafted an email, reinstating Lena, effective immediately, and fired it off to Sheila with a CC to the board. This ends now. She's back, no discussion. By noon, Lena was rehired, her text lighting up his phone. Thank you, Mr. Langston. I won't forget this, and Marcus felt a spark of triumph, a piece of his vision reclaimed. He called a virtual meeting, the board's faces flickering. Onto his screen, their ties looser now, their eyes wary after the footage win. Lena's back, he said, voice steady. Victor framed her, and HR let it slide. I've got proof, logs, tapes, it's done. The chairman nodded, slow and grudging. Good call, Marcus, we'll back you. The CFO chimed in, stocks, stabilizing, let's keep it clean. Marcus exhaled, the weight lifting. Thinking he'd turned a corner, rooted out the poison Victor had spread inside his ranks. He'd fought for Lena, won her job back, exposed the lie, a victory that felt solid, a stand against the cowardice that had let her fall. He leaned back, the chair creaking, and let himself believe it, just for a moment, that he'd wrested control from Victor's grip, that his empire could still stand tall. But then the phone rang, a number he didn't know, and a voice cut through, smooth and cold. Marcus Langston, this is Harold Grayson, city councilman, we need to talk. Marcus's spine stiffened, the name unfamiliar but the tone dripping with authority, a weight that pressed harder when Harold added, Victor's my nephew, and you're making a mess I don't appreciate. The line crackled, Marcus's breath catching as Harold went on. That store of yours, it's a problem now, and I fix problems. The call ended abrupt, a dead tone ringing in his ear, and Marcus sat frozen, the victory curdling fast. Harold Grayson, a councilman, Victor's uncle, a new player with power that dwarfed the ex-cops. And he wasn't asking, he was warning. Marcus's hands shook, the lamp bag's dented box flashing in his mind. Lena's smile a ghost now because this wasn't just a store fight anymore. It was a war with teeth, and the jaws were closing. He'd thought reinstating Lena was a win, a blow against Victor's reach, but it had poked a bigger beast, one with clout to crush him whole. The room felt smaller, the walls leaning in, and Marcus knew the next hit wouldn't be a fire. It'd be worse, sharper, a blade aimed at his empire's heart. He stood, pacing again, the floorboards creaking under his weight, his mind racing to map the new threat. Harold's voice lingered, calm but lethal, a promise of retaliation for daring to defy his nephew. Lena was back, sure, but at what cost? His own HR had buckled, his board had wavered, and now a councilman was in play. A man who could pull strings Marcus couldn't see. The footage, the logs, they'd saved him once, but this was bigger. A system rigged to protect its own, and Marcus was the outsider, even in his own company. Victor hadn't just burned his car, he'd lit a fuse to a network of power, and Marcus's win had only fanned it higher. He stopped, staring out the window at the city's glow. The skyline he'd conquered now a battlefield, and felt the truth settle, heavy and unyielding. He'd fought off one betrayal, but another was rising, and it had hit harder than anything before. Marcus Langston sat rigid in Jamal's guest room, the councilman's voice, Harold Grayson's icy threat, still coiling around his thoughts like smoke from the car fire the night before. The Atlanta skyline glowed beyond the window, a jagged silhouette against the dawn, but its beauty felt mocking now. A city turning on him with every passing hour. His phone buzzed again, Jamal's contact flashing, and he answered, voice rough from a sleepless night. What now? Jamal's tone was clipped, urgent. Turn on the news, Channel 5, you're not gonna believe this. Marcus grabbed the remote, the TV flickering to life, and there it was. A breaking headline slashing across the screen. Langston Living Atlanta store shut down over health violations. The anchor, a slick guy in a pinstripe suit, read off a script, City. Officials acted swiftly after reports of unsanitary conditions, effective immediately. Marcus's chest tightened, his bruised ribs aching as he stood, the room spinning. Because this wasn't a coincidence. This was Harold, Victor's uncle, flexing muscle he hadn't seen coming. The footage cut to his store, the same one he'd walked into days ago, now cordoned off with yellow tape, cops milling around the entrance, their lights pulsing in the early light. A health inspector in a white coat waved a clipboard, his face stern, while employees stood outside, arms crossed, confusion etched into their frowns. Marcus recognized Lena among them, her navy vest loose, her eyes wide as she stared at the chaos. The anchor's voice droned on. Councilman Harold Grayson spearheaded the closure, citing public safety concerns after an anonymous tip. Marcus's jaw locked, Harold's name a gut punch, because that anonymous tip reeked of Victor. A tag team hit to bury him deeper. He muted the TV, the silence heavy, and dialed Sheila in HR. Her voice shaky when she picked up. Marcus, I just heard they're saying rats, mold, it's insane. He cut in, sharp, it's a lie. Sheila, you know that store's clean. What's the board doing? She hesitated. They're panicking. Stock's tanking again. They're blaming you. The words stung. His own team turning, and he hung up, the phone thudding onto the bed, Harold's power crashing over him like a wave. Jamal burst in, tie undone, his laptop open, got the city report. It's bullshit, vague claims, no evidence. Just Grayson's signature. Marcus paced, the floor creaking, his mind racing to connect the dots. Harold shutting his store with a snap of his fingers. Victor's revenge now a political sledgehammer. He'd built that location from nothing, sweated over every permit, every inspection, and now it was a ghost town. Locked down by a lie because he dared to reinstate Lena, dared to defy Victor's reach. The racial edge cut deep, a black CEO's empire dismantled by a white councilman's whim. No questions asked, no proof needed, just power and spite. He grabbed his jacket, the torn fabric stiff with dried blood, and headed for the store. Jamal trailing, you sure, man, they'll eat you alive out there. Marcus didn't answer, his resolve steel, because he couldn't sit still, couldn't let this stand without seeing it for himself. The lot was a circus when they arrived. News vans clogging the lanes, reporters swarming like flies, their mix thrusting at anyone who moved. Marcus pulled his cap low, blending into the knot of ex-employees huddled near a dumpster, their voices a mix of anger and fear. Lena spotted him, rushing over, her eyes red. They won't let us in. Said we're done. What's happening? He gripped her shoulder, steadying her. It's a setup, Lena. I'll fix it. But his words felt hollow, the tape flapping in the breeze. The store's logo dim behind locked doors. Harold emerged then, stepping from a black SUV, his silver hair gleaming, his suit pristine as he faced the cameras with a practiced frown. This is about protecting Atlanta, he said, voice smooth. No one's above the law, not even big business. His eyes flicked toward Marcus, a smirk tugging his lips, and Marcus felt the air shift. Harold gloating in plain sight, a king toppling a pawn he didn't even name. The employees turned on him then, their frustration boiling over. A stalker named Pete jabbing a finger. This your fault, man, you started this mess. Others nodded, their faces hard. We're out of jobs because of you. Marcus stepped back, the betrayal a fresh cut, because they didn't know he was the CEO. Just saw the guy in gray who'd sparked the fire now consuming them. Lena stayed quiet, her loyalty a thin thread, but the rest closed ranks, their anger a wall he couldn't breach. He turned to Jamal, voice low, we need a loophole, something to reopen. Jamal nodded, pulling his phone on it. Give me an hour. Marcus watched Harold Glad hand the press, the councilman's power a noose tightening, and felt the store slip away, his dream gutted by a lie he couldn't disprove fast enough. The racial sting burned, a black man's work erased, while a white politician smiled, the system nodding along without a blink. Jamal came through by noon, a gleam in his eye as he waved a tablet. Found it, old lease clause. Emergency reopening if the closure's contested within 24 hours. File it now. Marcus seized it, drafting a challenge with Jamal's help, citing the footage, the logs, every scrap proving the store was spotless. They sent it to the city, a legal jab that hit fast, and by afternoon, a judge ruled. Pending review, Langston Living reopens tomorrow. The news broke, cameras swarming again as the tape came down, employees shuffling back. Lena's smile faint but real. Marcus stood at the entrance, the doors swinging wide. A wind snatched from Harold's grip, the store breathing again. He'd rallied his people, turned the tide, and for a moment, he tasted triumph. The councilman's smirk wiped clean, Victor's plan stalled. The crowd thinned, the vans rolling out, and Marcus let himself believe it, that he'd held the line, kept his empire standing against the storm. But then the call came, Sheila's voice trembling. "Marcus, cops just hit your office, found drugs. Big stash, they're saying it's yours." His knees buckled, the phone slipping as he caught the doorframe, the store's fading to static. Harold's voice echoed, "I fix problems." And this was it, the counterpunch. A frame up so deep it'd bury him alive. He'd reopened the store, sure, but Victor's uncle wasn't playing small. This was a death blow. Drugs planted to paint him a kingpin, not a CEO. The triumph dissolved, replaced by a dread that clawed his gut, because this wasn't just about jobs or pride anymore. It was his freedom, his life, dangling by a thread Harold could snap. He turned to Jamal, voice hoarse, "They're not stopping," and Jamal's face darkened. The fight shifting to a battlefield Marcus hadn't mapped. The store buzzed behind him, alive again. But it felt hollow, a victory overshadowed by a shadow too big to outrun. He stepped inside, the fluorescent lights harsh against his swollen eyes, and scanned the aisles. The shelves he'd stocked with dreams, now a stage for a war he couldn't win alone. Harold's power wasn't just clout, it was a machine, grinding him down with every lever it pulled. And Victor was its fist, unrelenting, unbowed. The employees worked, oblivious. Lena ringing up a customer, but their trust was frayed, their blame a weight Marcus carried alone. He'd thought reopening was the stand, the moment he'd reclaim his ground. But it had only lit a bigger fuse, Harold's retaliation striking at his core, the drugs, the cops. It was a setup to end him, a racial script flipped to make him the villain in his own story. The store stood, yes, but Marcus didn't, not fully. The floor unsteady beneath him as he braced for the next hit, knowing it'd be worse, sharper. A blade aimed to cut him out of his own life. Marcus Langston stood inside his reopened Atlanta store, the hum of registers and rustle of bags a fragile pulse beneath the dread pooling in his gut. Sheila's trembling voice still rang in his ears. "Cops found drugs in your office." A blow that turned his legal win into ash. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting stark shadows across the aisles. But the victory of unlocking those doors felt like a ghost now, haunting him with Harold's promise, "I fix problems." He'd fought to save Lena, to save this place, and won, or so he'd thought. But the councilman's reach was a vice, squeezing tighter with every breath. Jamal stood beside him, tablet in hand, scrolling updates, his face grim. "DAS. Involved, Marcus, this isn't local anymore. They're saying kilos, not dime bags." Marcus's knees buckled, his bruised hand gripping a shelf, the wood creaking under his weight. Because kilos meant felony, meant life, a frame up so big it'd swallow his empire whole. He turned to the exit, "We need to see it," but the words barely left his lips before the store's glass doors shattered inward. A swarm of black-clad agents flooding through. The raid hit like a hurricane, D in bold white letters across their vests, rifles raised, voices barking, "Hands up, nobody move." Shoppers screamed, carts toppling as they bolted for cover, while employees froze, Lena dropping a scanner, her eyes wide with terror. Marcus raised his hands, slow and steady, his pulse a jackhammer. But an agent grabbed him, slamming him against a display of mugs, ceramic shattering around his feet. Marcus Langston. The agent snapped, a weary guy with a buzz cut, his grip iron on Marcus's arm. "Yeah," Marcus rasped, his ribs flaring. "What's this about?" The agent didn't answer, just yanked him toward the back, past gawking customers and trembling staff, the store a war zone in seconds. Jamal shouted, "He's got rights, back off." But another agent shoved him down, pinning him to the tiles, his tablet skittering away. Marcus twisted, catching Lena's gaze, her face pale, and mouthed, "Stay calm." Before they dragged him through the stockroom, the air thick with dust and panic, they hauled him to his downtown office, a sleek space atop Langston Living's HQ, now crawling with agents tearing through drawers, flipping files, their boots scuffing the hardwood he'd picked himself. The weary agent shoved Marcus into a chair, cuffs snapping back on, the steel cold against his wrists, and pointed to a desk corner where a duffel bag sat, unzipped, bricks of white powder spilling out. "Yours," the agent said, voice flat. "Found it right here. Cocaine to kilos, street value $500,000. Marcus's jaw dropped. The lie so bold it stole his breath. "That's not mine. I've never seen it." The agent smirked, leaning in. "Tell it to the judge, drug lord." The words cut deep, racial venom dripping from them. A black CEO turned kingpin in their script. No questions, just cuffs and a bag he'd never touched. Marcus's mind raced. Harold's smirk flashing. Victor's hand in this, a setup so tight it'd choke him before he could fight. The news hit fast, vans swarming HQ, headlines screaming. CEO drug bust shocks Atlanta. The blonde reporter back, her voice gleeful. Marcus Langston, once a rising star, now facing decades behind bars. Inside, agents bagged the duffel, their radios crackling, while Marcus sat, cuffed, his empire crumbling under the weight of a lie. Jamal burst in, freed from the store, his tie gone, fury blazing. "Where's the warrant?" "This is illegal." The weary agent tossed a paper, "Right here, signed this morning." And Marcus caught the name, Harold Grayson. Councilman's pull stamped on every page. The racial sting burned, a system rigged to bury him. His success a threat they'd crush with planted bricks and a nod. Victor appeared then, strolling through the chaos, his navy vest swapped for a jacket, his smirk wide as he leaned against the doorframe. "Told you to stay out," he said, loud enough for the agents, and Harold followed, silver hair glinting, his suit pristine as he nodded to the press outside, gloating on live TV. "Crime doesn't pay, not in my city." Marcus's chest heaved, fury and despair warring inside, because this was it, the breaking point. His life shredded by a duo who'd never let him win. The agents hauled him up, marching him past flashing cameras. The crowd's gasps a dull roar, his mugshot already trending. Drug lord Langston. He'd built this company to defy the odds, to rise above the hate, but they'd flipped it, made him the monster, and the world ate it up, racial stereotypes their feast. Jamal trailed, shouting, "We'll fight this," but the cuffs bit deeper. The van waiting, and Marcus felt the walls close, freedom a memory as they shoved him inside. The ride was silent, the city blurring past, until Jamal's team struck back, hours later, leaking proof, store tapes, office logs, no drugs before the raid. A whistleblower clerk naming Victor planting the stash. The news shifted, set up, alleged in Langston case, and by night, a judge released him, the cuffs falling. Marcus staggering out, free but broken, his empire teetering. He stepped into the dark, the station's lights fading, and leaned against Jamal's car, his breath ragged, the wind bitter on his tongue. He'd escaped again, truth his shield, but the cost was blood high, his name scarred, his people shaken. Then it came, a crack in the night, a sniper's bullet grazing his shoulder, a hot sting that dropped him to his knees, blood seeping through his jacket. Jamal yelled, dragging him behind the car, tires squealing as a shadow fled. Victor's or Harold's, it didn't matter, they'd gone lethal. Marcus clutched his arm, pain searing. The shot a final jab, a promise they'd kill to keep him down. He'd thought the release was the end, thought he'd outrun the frame up, but this was their answer, a bullet to silence his fight. The street spun, red pooling under him, and he gasped, "They won't stop." Jamal's face grim as he pressed the wound, sirens wailing anew. The night swallowed them, the city a beast that had turned on its own, and Marcus felt it, the breaking point, not just his body but his spirit, battered by a hate that wouldn't quit. He'd reopened the store, cleared his name twice, but each win drew blood, each stand a target on his back. The D, the media, the bullet, all Harold's tools. Victor's fists, a system that saw him as less, even as he towered over it. Jamal's voice cut through, "Stay with me, man." But Marcus's eyes fluttered. The pain a tide pulling him under, and he wondered, how much more could he take? The store stood. His empire limped, but this was war now, not just survival. And the next move wasn't his. It was theirs, deadlier than ever. He'd slipped the noose again. But the rope was still there, tightening, and the ground beneath him was gone, leaving only the fight, raw and unyielding, as the sirens closed in. Marcus Langston slumped against Jamal's car, the night air thick with the coppery scent of his own blood. The sniper's bullet a searing gash across his shoulder. The Atlanta pavement pressed cold and gritty beneath him, his breath shallow. Each gasp a stab through his bruised ribs. Jamal crouched beside him, hands slick with red as he pressed the wound, his voice a lifeline cutting through the haze. "Hold on, man, help's coming." Sirens wailed closer, red and blue lights slashing the dark, but Marcus's vision blurred, the world tilting as pain and fury warred inside him. He'd slipped the DEAS cuffs hours ago, walked free with proof of the frame up, a win he'd thought would end it, but this bullet was Harold's answer, Victor's teeth, a final swing to bury him. His empire teetered, his body bled, but his mind burned clear. This wasn't over. Not while he still breathed. The ambulance screeched up, medics swarming, their gloved hands lifting him onto a stretcher, and Jamal's face faded as the doors slammed, the city shrinking to a pinpoint as they raced away. The hospital was a blur of white walls and antiseptic sting, doctors stitching his shoulder, their voices a dull hum against the roar in his head. "Grazed, no artery. You're lucky," one said. But Marcus didn't feel it, like a stranger. After weeks of this war, Jamal stayed close, pacing the room, his phone buzzing with updates. "Cops are hunting the shooter, no ID yet." Marcus nodded, his throat dry, the bandage tight against his skin, and forced himself up, wincing as the four tugged. "I'm done hiding," he rasped. "Time to end this." Jamal frowned. "You're half dead, man, rest." But Marcus shook his head, his resolve steel, because rest was surrender, and he'd bled too much to fold now. He'd built Langston, living to defy the odds, to rise above the hate, and Harold, Victor. They'd turned it into a battlefield, but he wasn't the prey anymore. He was the hunter. He checked out against advice, the sling awkward on his torn jacket, and Jamal drove him to HQ. The skyline looming, a city that had chewed him up but wouldn't spit him out. The next dawn, Marcus stood before a podium in his office lobby, cameras flashing, reporters packed tight, their mix a forest of steel. His suit hung loose, the sling stark against the dark fabric, but his voice was steady, cutting through the buzz. "I'm Marcus Langston, CEO of Langston Living, and I've been undercover in my own store, seeing the truth." The room hushed, lenses zooming, as he laid it bare, every snub, every blow, Jake's dismissal, Victor's frame-ups, the mob, the fire, the drugs, the bullet, all of it, raw and unfiltered. "This wasn't random," he said, eyes blazing. "This was racial, systemic. A councilman and his nephew trying to bury me because I'm black and I dared to succeed." He held up a stack of evidence, tapes, texts, logs, a whistleblower's affidavit from a clerk who'd seen Victor plant the cocaine, every shred he'd gathered with Jamal's team. "Here's the proof, and I'm not stopping until they pay." The crowd erupted, questions flying, but Marcus stepped back, letting the storm break. His truth a grenade lobbed into Harold's empire. The fallout was swift, brutal, beautiful. Social media lit up, #Justice for Marcus trending, clips of his speech racking millions of views. The tapes leaked wide, Victor's voice clear. "Put it in his desk. No one'll check." Protests swelled outside City Hall, chants echoing, "No more lies." The news flipped, the blonde reporter scrambling, shocking allegations against Councilman Grayson, her tone shaky now. By noon, cops raided Harold's office, his silver hair disheveled as they cuffed him mid-speech, his podium crashing as the cameras rolled. "This is a disgrace," he bellowed. But the crowd cheered, justice a rare, wild thing. Victor fled, his car peeling out of Atlanta, but karma caught him fast, a curve too sharp, a crash that left him dead in a ditch, his smirk erased by twisted steel. Marcus watched it unfold from HQ, the TV flickering, his shoulder throbbing, and felt the weight lift, not fully, but enough, a wind carved from blood and grit. His store roaring back to life, customers flooding in, support loud and fierce. He walked the aisles that afternoon, the reopened store buzzing, Lena at her register, her smile bright as she rang up a line, stretching to the door. Employees nodded, their blame gone, replaced by "Didn't know it was you, boss Pete." The stocker mumbled, stacking mugs with new respect. The logo gleamed above, Langston Living Reborn. A phoenix from the ashes Harold and Victor had tried to scatter. Marcus stood at the entrance, the glass repaired, the lot quiet now, and let himself breathe. The fight won, the empire his again. He'd gone public, ripped off the disguise, and turned their hate into his strength. A reversal that broke their spines and lifted his own. The bullet scar ached, a reminder of the cost, but he'd survived, outsmarted a system rigged to crush him, and that was enough, for now, to stand tall. But then the twist came, sharp and cold, slicing through the triumph like a blade. Jamal rushed in, his face ashen, a phone trembling in his hand. "Marcus, it's Lena. She's gone." Marcus turned, the words a punch. "Gone? What do you mean?" Jamal's voice broke. "Shot downtown. An hour ago. Sniper. Same mo as you. She's dead." The store faded, the hum of victory drowned by a roar in his ears, and Marcus stumbled, catching the counter, his knees weak. "No," he whispered, but Jamal pressed on. "She'd been recording, secret audio of Harold, threats, plans. She sent it to me right before. Said it'd keep you safe." Marcus's breath stopped, the truth crashing in. Lena wasn't collateral. She was the target, not him. The bullet meant for her, her tapes the real threat Harold had hunted. He pulled Jamal's phone, the audio crackling, Harold's voice. "Get her too, she knows," and Marcus's heart shattered, the wind hollowed out by her blood. He sank to the floor, the tiles cold, Lena's smile flashing, her kindness, her fight, all snuffed out because she'd stood with him. The store thrived around him, customers chattering, oblivious, but Marcus was alone, the cost too high. A hero lost to save him. He'd thought the bullet was his, thought he'd borne the worst, but it was hers, a sacrifice he'd never asked for, never seen coming. The racial sting cut deepest here, a black woman silenced while he stood, the system's last laugh, taking her to spite him. Jamal knelt, gripping his shoulder. "She got them, Marcus. Her tapes nailed Harold. He's done." But it wasn't enough, not when her register sat empty, her sticker stash untouched, her light gone. Marcus stood, slow, the sling heavy, and walked to her station, touching the counter, her ghost a weight he'd carry forever. The store roared on, sales spiking, the board calling with praise. "You've turned it around, Marcus." But he barely heard, the triumph stained red. Harold was cuffed, Victor dead, justice served, but Lena's death was the price. A twist that flipped victory into tragedy. He faced the cameras again that night, voice steady but eyes hollow. "This is for Lena. She fought with me, died for me, and I'll never stop fighting for her." The crowd cheered, but Marcus turned away, the store's glow dim behind him, a monument to a win that cost too much. He'd gone undercover to see the truth, faced hate that burned his car, framed him, shot him. But losing Lena was the wound that wouldn't heal, a scar on his soul, proof that even winning came with blood. He drove to the lot later, alone, the night still, the shattered windshield of his new car a mirror to the first day, when this started with a slur. He'd won, yes, Harold locked up, Victor gone, the store thriving, but the message lingered. Rage and resolve in a vow he whispered to the dark. "For you, Lena, I'll keep going." The city slept, unaware, but Marcus didn't, his fight eternal now, haunted by her sacrifice. A black CEO who'd defied the odds, only to find the cost was a life he couldn't save. The reversal wasn't just their fall, it was hers, a tragedy. That fueled his fire, a flame that'd burn until the hate was ash too. This story of Marcus Langston lays bare the raw, relentless face of racial injustice, showing how deeply it can infiltrate even the spaces we build ourselves. One key lesson is resilience. Marcus faced snubs, beatings, frame-ups, and a sniper's bullet, yet he fought back with truth and grit, proving that standing up, even when battered, can topple giants. Another takeaway is the cost of systemic bias. From Jake's dismissal to Harold's political sabotage, racism wasn't just personal. It was a machine, crushing Marcus and Lena because of their skin. It teaches us that power protects its own. Victor and Harold wielded influence to twist justice, but exposure can break that shield. Lena's sacrifice drives home the steep price of allyship. She died to save Marcus, a haunting reminder that fighting hate often demands more than we expect. Finally, the story underscores the power of truth. Marcus's tapes and resolve turned lies into dust, showing that evidence and courage can shift the tide, even against overwhelming odds. For us, it's a call to see beyond headlines, to question who's cast as the villain and why, and to stand firm when the world bends against us. Racism's roots run deep, but so can our resolve to uproot them. What do you think? How far would you go to fight injustice in your own life? Drop a comment with number 1 if you'd risk it all like Marcus, or number 2 if you'd dig for proof like he did. Hit like if this stirred you, and subscribe for more real stories. Share this if you believe truth can win. Thanks for joining this journey. Here's to a world where justice isn't a battle but a right. Stay strong out there.